Hail and welcome back to Elder Futhark Rune Divination 101. Today we will be discussing the rune of Mannaz, the 20th rune in the Elder Futhark, third eight's fourth rune. It is the halfway point, therefore, for the third and final eight. Mannaz has been a very interesting rune for me. So Mannaz, it is the rune of the self. It is the rune that literally means man or mankind. So man is not to be taken as masculine or male. It is to be associated with human being, mankind. It is referring to the human collective. And it is also referring to the self, the inner workings, the inner activities, the inner energies, our very soul in many ways. The modern day letter equivalent of the rune is M, as in man or metal or might. The associated astrological body is Jupiter. And normally I don't discuss these signs all that much, or the astrological bodies or something like that. I don't discuss them that much. However, in this case, I have truly come to understand why Jupiter, the ruler of the gods in the Roman pantheon, is associated, or at least the astrological body, which is named after the Roman god of rulership in the Roman pantheon. It is a very powerful, in-your-face, dominating and domineering rune. The associated element is air. It is very much connected to energy, chi, ki, the higher self, the collective consciousness, or perhaps you can call energy, chi, or ki, prana, or something along those lines, depending on your tradition. Also, if you don't mind, skull. I'm having a little bit of a party, well-deserved celebration, honestly, with several of my friends who are all magical practitioners. And yeah, we've had some very, very interesting experiences with this rune today. Because, ironically, I did not handle the final, or perhaps very fittingly, I should say, not ironically, it's not the word I'm looking for. Fittingly, because it is about the self, but also about the greater collective. I have been initiated into this rune in full today, and therefore felt the urge, the compulsion perhaps, if you will, to make this video. And this has to do with the fact that I was revealed things that I needed through the help of my friends, my family, my allies, both amongst humankind and amongst the gods, amongst my spirits. And I have seen the flip side of these energies, of these powers behind this rune. So before we move on to the main body of this topic, the associated gods with this rune are Odin, Frigg, and Heimdall. So Heimdall is perhaps a surprise to some, but that is very much a connected god to this rune. Heimdall, as a son of Odin, is said sometimes to be the father of humankind. He is also said to have instated the Norse Germanic society in its form, the way in which it was back in the day. He was therefore also an upholder of order, an upholder against the chaos outside, against the creeping chaos, the chaotic energies, or in the mythologies, of course, we call these beings, these things, these energies, the Jotun, the giants. So we see that Heimdall, as instator of the societal structure and also as father of humankind, is therefore a very fitting, very powerful, very strong deity associated with this. So in many ways, where Heimdall is our father, Odin is of course our grandfather. And this connection, this ancestral parental connection, is very fitting, very noticeable in this particular rune in the way it is portrayed, because it is very much the case that Mannaz, dealing with the self and dealing with humankind as a whole, and also which we will be discussing later on in Ophila, we find in that connection to the gods a very genetic connection. We find very much, unlike in many other traditions and various pagan traditions around the world, the gods in our tradition, in the Germanic tradition, or traditions, whatever you want to call it, they are very much parental. They are very much familial, or elder kin, if you will. They are exemplars, they are inspirers, they have sacrificed for themselves, for us, to give us knowledge, to give us wisdom, to give us inspiration, to give us many gifts. And in this, of course, Odin comes into play with his sacrifices of the runes. And here we find not so much where Heimdall is the progenitor of humankind as a whole, an instigator of the greater whole on a societal level. We find Odin as an inspiration to the development of the self, of the person, of the individual, of the human being. Odin as a embodiment of wisdom, of the empowerer of the self, of the individual, he who has shown us how to sacrifice. And make no mistake, Heimdall has shown sacrificial capabilities and willingness as well. Few people perhaps know this, but Heimdall is said to have sacrificed a earlobe to the guardian of the Well of Urd for a drink of wisdom. So Heimdall himself is not unfamiliar with sacrifice. And of course, to stand watch on Bifrost, the bridge that leads to Asgard, pretty much constantly 24/7 is, of course, a very great sacrifice, a great feat, because he is a very patient man for doing so. So, I mean, I would get bored after maybe 2 hours. So, you know, that is a very noteworthy thing, to constantly be vigilant, to constantly be watchful, to finalize and facilitate the association of Heimdall before we move on with Odin's connection. It is to constantly be vigilant, to be constantly watchful, order, watching, being a bulwark against chaos. Now, of course, eventually, as we see that in Ragnarok, where Loki and the giants arrive to do battle with the Aesir and the Vanir and the Einherjar and all the other spirits and beings associated with that. That chaos eventually comes and eventually is bound to overthrow a certain kind of order. And this is the natural way of things. This is what we see in society. It is what we see in human beings. It's what we see in individuals. This is where Odin comes in. He, in many ways, can be thought of as a bringer of change, as a bringer of evolution, as a bringer of wisdom. He, on one hand, seeks to uphold order, because he is, in the minds of some people, as I have read, obsessed, quote unquote, with holding off Ragnarok, to keep hold of the order that has been established across the 9 worlds. And of course, this is eventually doomed to fail, because it is just a natural way of things to progress, to proceed. But at the same time, we also see a very, very eager willingness to sacrifice, to give of oneself, to improve oneself, and perhaps even to improve others, to improve those around us. And it is also with these energies and the emphasis of these energies that I have come in contact with during my initiation into this most powerful rune. And to move on, here we have the society in Heimdall represented, and we have the individual represented in Odin. And Frigg, Odin's wife, who's also the lady of marriage, of the home and hearth. All these elements are, of course, what on a smaller scale bind a society together. They are the in-between connectors on which a society is built. An individual loves another individual, they have offspring, in most cases, of course, and they build a family, and that family, all these families, they meet and they form tribes, and out of tribes come other kinds of government, of course, eventually, as we have seen throughout human history. And this is very much, in my mind, what Frigg represents here on the societal level. But at the same time, on an individual level, Frigga or Frigg is often said to be all-seeing or all-knowing. She is said to have foresight into all things, but she does not speak of them. And this is, of course, a very interesting thing, because we see Odin, her own husband, quest across the world for wisdom, for knowledge, for insight, whereas Frigg already sees these things, and she doesn't speak to anyone of the things that she sees, so the myths tell us. So it is quite peculiar to me that the things that I have experienced with these runes have also been on a very different, in a very different way, kind of show me this. And yeah, it is a very, very interesting thing. So to continue on, we are leaving for now, the discussions of the associated gods behind us, but we will come back to them later. So Mannaz being the rune of the self, of humanity at large as a whole. It is the good, it is the bad, it is the light, it is the dark, it is everything in between, all the shades of gray. It is what makes us up as individuals. It is our light side, if you will. The light side is usually what I would prefer to call that, which we express outwardly. Our mostly pleasant attributes, are mostly, you know, socially acceptable attributes, and whereas our shadow side, our darker side, is facing, of course, our less benevolent, albeit perhaps they may be perceived only as such by society in which we live, but they may not necessarily be bad in and of themselves, but it may just be that the current society we live in, that this is something that is unacceptable. And I'm not really even throwing out any examples there, because this, of course, greatly varies from person to person. So that is, these are all things that Mannaz represents. And Mannaz, I have found, is a very integral part to understanding the human condition. It is a very interesting rune in the sense that it has tied all these previous lessons in the Futhark together, and it is now teaching us how to unify it within the self. Now, I've said it before, the runes are not just a magical system, they are also a mystical system of initiation for self-improvement and self-empowerment. So, these are things that I feel are very applicable to this rune. And it makes sense. I mean, what is Mannaz in its, structural makeup, in the sense of how it looks, but an Awaz rune with also a Wunyo and a Dagas, and perhaps even a Lagus, if you are so inclined to see it in there. So, these are all very interesting runes. Dagas is a rune of transformation. It is a rune of daytime, and we will discuss that all the way at the end, of course. And perhaps this will become more clear both to you and to myself as I am going to be initiated into this rune. But at the same time, it also represents happiness, because how can one truly accept oneself if one is not fully, happy with themselves, if one is not fully in line with themselves? So Lagus is, of course, also the understanding, as we will discuss in the next video on the roots, the understanding of the intuitive mind, of the psychic connection, of the waters of life, of everything that is binding life together. I've sometimes received flashes of insight on Lagus that are associated with birth water in many ways, in a symbolic sense, of course. And I will discuss that more in the next video, like I said. But to be frank, Mannaz is a very dualistic and at the same time a very unified rune. And this is, of course, where Dagas also fits in, because Dagas is a rune that very much reminds us of the infinity symbol. It is an endless loop. The only thing is that it is not a loop, it is straight staves. The principle to me is very much the same, because the Futhark in and of itself, the Elder Futhark at least, looks like straight lines. There is no curve in sight in the Elder Futhark. So this is the thing. And I feel that AWAS very strongly fits in here as well, as we have discussed in the previous Elder Futhark video, where AWAS is the communication and the societal establishing of bonds, but also between individuals. And this too, I have faced both the positive and the negative in. So that is very, very interesting. Mannaz has made me ask myself, beyond the hobbies, beyond the gender and the sex that I am, beyond everything about me that I think of in day-to-day life, beyond what I do as a career, beyond what I study in college, beyond all these things, beyond the music I listen to, it made me question, who am I as a soul? Who am I as a divine being? What do I stand for? What is my end goal in this blank slate of a universe? What do I want to do in this life? What is my end game? And it has made me sit down, and it has made me face myself rapidly, but also at the same time very slowly, which is another beautiful dichotomy, duality that I have seen with this rune. Because the groundwork for this rune was laid out years ago. This rune, like I said, the groundwork for it has been laid out years ago. It had been laid out against my conscious knowledge, and very strongly against the conscious knowledge of the individuals that were involved. I had just come out of Christianity, and I'm fed up with Christianity anyway. I've been questioning this religion, all these religions, for months to years now, and because it slowly started, of course, and then eventually built up over time to a significant questioning of these religions. So it is basically there where it started. If you have watched my previous videos on excarnating the Lamb, you will know that I have talked about guardian angels and their wicked nature, basically, about how they're here to control us and not how they're here to help us. If you would find that an interesting thing to know more about, if you haven't already done so, please check it out. It is my personal experience that organized religion, the Abrahamic religions in particular, to give you a brief overview, is very much here to control humanity. And if a human being seeks power outside of Yahweh, then Yahweh is going to crack down on that, especially if one is baptized and therefore dedicated to Yahweh. And this goes equally so for Allah, of course. So it is my very strong belief that even Yahweh and Allah are traceable to the most likely Sumerian pantheon. There is a faction in the Sumerian pantheon that is very much interested in keeping this world under wraps, under control. And I feel that this very strongly ties into all sorts of conspiracies that you hear from quote-unquote conspiracy theorists regarding reptilians and all that sort of things. And I do think that there is indeed some truth to that in some way, shape, or form, although not quite as literal as you may think. But that is a topic for a very, very different time. Suffice to say, Yahweh, or perhaps his name is Enlil, perhaps his name is Anu. I am personally convinced that his name is truly Enlil, a Sumerian storm god who is sometimes said to be the ruler of the Sumerian pantheon, which in many ways actually makes sense. Yahweh is often associated with storms if you read the Bible. Loud thunder, booming voices from the sky, quote-unquote angels that look like stormy beings and who always say, fear not, because they look so scary, supposedly. And basically, it's just one giant operation to try to keep everybody repressed and inside Yahweh's control. And I have, of course, through my initiation in the runes, because it's very much a system about personal empowerment, just like our gods are, thank the gods that they have tried to repress and suppress me. By manipulating it, they in fact did not make my shamanic illness better, they made it worse. They installed things on the punishment energetic constructs, the energetic constructs that were placed on me as a way of punishment, which I of course back then did not know about, as I also had a blocked third eye. So there was a culmination of circumstances of various contracts and various spiritual ties, as befits a shamanic initiation, that had to be undone, which together had created my shamanic illness and spiritual illness, if you will, which in my case manifested mostly in the mental department by having obsessive issues, obsessive compulsive thoughts, unwanted thoughts, rituals and stuff like that. Again, I am not 100% sure on that connection, but I do very strongly suspect that, because I have come into contact with certain Sumerian beings, some of them who have appeared benevolent to me, and some of them who have appeared hostile. And it was a while ago that I was approached by a being who I have met before, who said to me while I was taking a bath, and he was just standing there. My attention was drawn because I'm just sitting in the bath, I'm just chilling out, and I'm thinking about things to write about, and I just see this being standing there, and he tells me, "I'm glad you chose our side," and I'm like, "What the fuck does that mean?" But I guess we'll find that out. And I am assuming that this means that I'm glad you chose the side of the forces on this planet who want to see the world free from the Yahweh influence, the Abrahamic influence, which I am starting to become very, very, very fervent in, because I am absolutely sick of these despicable, disgusting beings, these tyrants that are just out and about running amok. And I find it frankly disgusting how many people are willing to be sheep. So, but of course, that is what the Bible says. Yes, the meek and the sheep will inherit the earth. So that is Yahweh's promise to humankind. It is not in the betterment of the human race, of course. In fact, quite the opposite, because it does not serve us to be spiritually stagnant. We may have gotten very far in, medical and scientific understanding of things, which is wonderful. But at the same time, there is a very old, but at the same time also very unrecognized frontier, which is of course the spiritual, and how the spiritual affects someone's health and someone's mind. And this is very much what a shaman is supposed to do. They're supposed to help people untangle these things. They're supposed to help people to empower themselves. And this is also very strongly why I follow the example of Odin, where I draw inspiration from him, because he is, at the end of the day, very strongly a shamanic god. So he is basically a god of shamans in many ways. The bringer of inspiration, of Mannaz, the bringer of the what, of rage, of divine ecstasy, of divine fury. And this is something I have seen in my own work. I have discussed that topic before in explaining the Lamb videos. Briefly, I feel that these guardian angels are often placed in the spine or in the brain. In my case, it was in some ways both, actually, because there are certain things that were placed inside of me by Yahweh as punishment that are currently still active, although they are beginning to falter. The more that I break away and strip away my connection from Yahweh, it has not been just through my own strength. It has also been through the collaboration of said friends that are over right now, through my gods, through the spirit family that I have, and through my ancestors, through all these spirits and beings that have helped and assisted me, and have shown me the way, that have guided me. And of course, thanks to my own soul, thanks to the own manipulations of my very soul in this life, that that has brought about all these wonderful changes that have taken place today, which inspired me to make this video today, even though it is late in the night, deep in the night. And I'm trying to insert the energies and lessons of Mannaz, and why I am saying the things that I am saying into this particular story. Because at the end of the day, this is not just about my personal experiences. It is meant to teach you, the viewer, and to help me reiterate the lessons that I have learned, so that you and myself may learn from it as well. So, and maybe that you perhaps may know what to expect should you choose to be initiated into the runes. And every situation will be different. That is not why I am exclusively making the runes, therefore, but to understand or to help you understand these energies and to help you understand how these things can work and how they sometimes interconnect with each other even years down the road. Shaman is a being who is chosen by spirits or by a group of spirits or perhaps by multiple spirits. I consider myself an eclectic shaman. I have, overall, I like to think, decent to good relations with most gods of various pantheons, and there are a few of them. Yahweh happens to be one of them, who I am on absolute horrible footing with. And in all perfect honesty, I wouldn't have it any other way, because Yahweh is an absolute scumbag. Yet again, in his servants, this is reflected. They are just as much slaves of Yahweh or of the particular faction of the Sumerian pantheon that I spoke about earlier, as I was being turned into by them. Now, of course, I have a very resilient mind. I underwent 500 years of initiation. It is very much appealing to yeah, the docile, complacent, flaccid spine attitude of the Christians, and that you see in Muslims where they throw their lives away like maniacal suicide bombers, all for the glory of a God that doesn't give a fuck about them. And it's just what they are. They are willing pawns, and they sicken me, and they should sicken you too. Why should they sicken you? Because they're not here for the betterment of the human race. They are not here to help you. They are not here to heal you. The Armageddon that they promise is exactly that. It is Armageddon, and it is exactly what it says in the Bible. They want they want to take your essence, they want to take your spirit, they want to enslave it, they want to feed off of it, because that is what heaven is. It is a Borg cube where Yahweh processes the emotions and energies and experiences of people to feed himself and his little squad of overlords. That's what Yahweh and cohort is. That is what they are. That is what they do. And some people like them, they are just here to enslave. And this, of course, is part of the realization that I have come to, not so much the Jehovitic part, because I was already aware of that, as my Excarnating the Lamb videos show, but that these individuals were indeed, as I have so strongly suspected for so long, and my friends have pretty much guaranteed me, they were indeed in league with Yahweh and with associated gods, who I very strongly hold a conviction towards are a faction, and I say a faction, in the Sumerian pantheon. Why do I say a faction? Because I very strongly suspect that the other being that came to me and said, I'm glad you chose our side, I think this individual, he is another being of Sumerian origin or of Anunnaki origin. Let's be plain here. The Anunnaki is, and I know that this, oftentimes comes into the area where most people go. No, that's a conspiracy theory. I disagree with you. I used to think so. I very strongly used to agree with that viewpoint. And again, I am not necessarily saying that all of them, or even most of them, are evil, or here, and by evil I mean in direct conflict with us as human beings, because that is the definition of evil I am going with here. They are out to destroy us, or enslave us, or catalyze us, if you will. These are all things that I have come to understand a bit more clearly just how true this actually is. I have read other experiences from other shamans, started researching all this stuff, and eventually I just came to the conclusion that there is truth to this. There is very strong truth to this. I do think that Christianity is a religion um, made by beings who very much just want to control, want to keep humanity in the dark, give them a savior, give them a shepherd to follow, to lead, to make sure that the flock stays under control, because that's what it is. If you drift, you get shepherded back into the fold. And if you don't listen to all the nice little treats that they give you, they will start beating you with their rods. That's literally what is happening. And that is what has happened to me. That has happened to so many magicians, to so many witches and other practitioners that I have seen. Um, I mean, I know witches, I know druids, and I've seen it. I've seen it time and time again. It's amusing to me how someone that's tried to collar me, that tried to enslave me in such a sick, manipulative manner, profiting off of inexperience at the time. Not anymore, but at the time, inexperience. It just, yeah, it makes me smile because here I see that as part of my initiation, my very soul and the runes themselves have used even my enemies against me in order to shape me, in order to strengthen me, in order to empower me. They sought to enslave me, but really I enslaved them. I have used them for my own purposes and for my own initiation. The runes are above the gods themselves. The runes are universal energies. Odin had to sacrifice to them, the highest member of our own pantheon, or at least the leader of our own pantheon, I should say, which kind of makes him the highest in position. So even he had to sacrifice significantly. For wisdom, he had to give an eye, he had to inflict wounds on himself to receive the runes. Of course, the myths talk about the Scandinavian Futhark, but the Scandinavian Futhark, when these myths were finally written down, come from the Elder Futhark, which is when the Germanic tribes still had an oral tradition, so we wouldn't have known about initiatory methods and ways in which the Elder Futhark would have come about, would have brought about in the life of the would-be rune master, which is of course what I am very much striving to be and what I'm very close to becoming. And I can feel it because that is what this rune has done. It has very strongly made me realize just how fucking close I am, just how fucking powerful I've become. And it's I wow, it's great. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's great that people who think that they are in control of me, that they were really controlled to my benefit. I don't want control on people, but I like to think that that's why the runes chose these people. Because they, maybe my soul, along with the runes, because we are all gods. Even Jesus said, don't ye know that ye are gods? And I just happen to be the smarter god on a higher level. And the runes saw fit to use willing victims. So I figured that my soul, the runes, they took them, and I thought, you like to serve? Very well. You will serve me. You will serve me in my initiation, and you will serve me to help gain my freedom. You will help me gain my power, and you will help me gain the knowledge and wisdom that I seek. And it has been a process of 500 years, as I've talked about in previous videos. I think the 9 days and 9 nights that Odin hung from Yggdrasil, I don't think they're literal days and nights. I think they were lifetimes or maybe centuries. So I don't exactly know how that began, how that came about, but it is a very strong hypothesis I have, and the further I delve into these divine mysteries, if you want to ironically call it that, the more I'm starting to think that that is the case. Because if for me, who has not even yet, reached a position in the pantheon or some other, uh, position in the spirit world as such, if it already took me 500 years, the original individual that retrieved them, Odin, would of course have had to sacrifice far more. So this is very much my personal hypothesis and gnosis on the runes in that regard. But I found it highly amusing that those that would keep society contained and those that would seek to keep me contained, someone who very much wants to see people free, very much wants to see people become empowered, that they tried to collar me, and in turn, from a higher level, they were collared by me instead. And they were collared by the runes. Again, the runes are above the gods, so in some ways, I would of course say that the runes are also above me. And in that case, I would say that's why I'm being initiated into them, to be able to use their power, to be able to use their energies. And I have not loved every second of it, but it is in moments like these where I'm thinking to myself, I fucking love the runes. I really do. I hope that shows you what kind of a ride you're in for when you engage in the runes. There will be times when seemingly your own gods will turn against you, when life itself will turn against you, where it makes you think to yourself, what the fuck did my previous incarnation do? Why the fuck did I decide to initiate myself in a system like this? Well, it's really simple. It's worth it. Maybe you might not realize this now, maybe you might not realize this 200 years down the line, but on a soul level, the great you, the divine you, the god or goddess, or whatever you identify as that you are, it's worth it. What these symbols are. They're powerful beyond measure. They're powerful beyond measure, and that's why I love them. I love that they represent the very energies of the source of the creator itself. And that's why I love working with this system, because it is such a primal shamanic energy behind it. It is an energy of creation and of total destruction. From Genunga Gapta Ragnarok and back again. I used to think of Ragnarok as something bad or evil, or that I related it to the Christian Armageddon, but now I see that really Ragnarok is necessary. Destruction is necessary. And if that means destroying your enemies to build something better, okay, gladly. So, this is another thing that Mannaz has taught me. The path that I walk, which I have discussed in Tiwaz, it is a path that I walk gladly because I quite frankly enjoy it. Because I like walking that way. And that's why, likely, as I said, they were afraid. That's really all I have to say about Mannaz as a general. So we will now be moving on to the divination methods. So Mannaz upright in divination, its possible meaning. Mannaz upright in divination can have multiple meanings. It can relate, as we discussed earlier, to several different things, whether it be individual or whether it be to a group of friends and their interconnected bonds, which is different than or at least how we as a group work together, how we function as a group and even as a greater society, which is different from Awaz's interpersonal communication and bonds in that sense. So in the terms of communications and establishing partnerships. Mannaz is more about the more esoteric, how do we influence each other, if that makes sense. Awaz is communicating what we feel and receiving communication about what they feel, and so on and so forth. Mannaz is more that essence of how are we all interconnected and how are we all intertwined on a more profound level. So do keep that in mind when you are reading and Mannaz shows up. Mannaz upright can indicate a knowledge of the self. It can indicate that you know what you want, that you are in touch with yourself and in line with yourself, and that you are finally being true to yourself, that you are not manipulated, that you are not under the influence of malignant factors in whatever form or shape they may come. It can indicate that an action taken may influence more than just the self. Therefore, here we see its interconnectedness aspects that we have with other human beings. Therefore, it can also indicate a positive change in a particular group or in a society, perhaps. It can indicate a positive change in oneself, in one's own psyche, or even on a higher level, perhaps even on a physical or mental level. Now, keep in mind, I'm very much of the opinion that all these things are interconnected with each other. So, if you heal one part of yourself, you are also more likely to heal another part of yourself. So, Mannaz may be a realization of one's own manhood or womanhood. Like, hey, I'm finally all grown up. I'm finally entirely empowered and prepared and ready. And that I'm not speaking here of a coming of age kind of thing. I'm talking about a all grown up as a person, all self-realized, self-actualized in that sense. I know my shadow side, I know my brighter side, and I have integrated all these things into myself. And I am finally understanding the energies that run through me and around me and the ways in which I interact with them. So, it may be a call to utilize your own intellect, your own academic skills in a certain manner. It can be an encouragement to look to your creative energies. It can be an encouragement to rely on yourselves. It may be a call to look to friends, perhaps even, and their influence on which they have on you. Positive friends, of course, in this case. And that's particularly in areas where like the common good is involved. So if it like serves to strengthen bonds between you, if it serves to, although that is perhaps in some ways more Awaz's territory. But again, like I'm saying, I'm talking about more the esoteric, not so much about the communicative. I mean, Awaz is the means through which Mannaz is oftentimes facilitated, if that makes sense. And vice versa, of course, which is why they are right next to each other, just like Awaz and Berthano, masculine and feminine, are right next to each other, which is also the dichotomy that we see in Lagus and Ingwaz after this. Lagus, the feminine, Ingwaz, the masculine. And then we have Ophila and Dagas, or if you are so inclined, Dagas and Ophila. I am of the former party. So, as I have specified throughout these videos, I don't know. It's somehow important to me. I don't quite know why. I have an inkling, but we will get there in the video when we will get there. So it may mean a positive outcome for a resolution of a dispute or of social issues. One example of Mannaz upright would be that, for example, if you are, inquiring about, hey, I made some art a couple of weeks ago. I have it laying around. I got it framed. It looks really good. It's like gallery worthy. Is it going to sell? Maybe you enter the gallery first, and you say to yourself, I wonder if this art piece is going to sell. And you do a rune reading on it, but rather than answering your question, because the future is at the end of the day uncertain, because everybody has free will, everybody has their own weird and orlog that they utilize and are influenced by on how they react to everything. So there are factors that are involved there, of course, but at the end of the day, everybody still has their decisions that they make in the moment. And this will have sometimes short, sometimes no, sometimes long-term consequences. And yeah, it's so to come back to my example, this particular example would then, of course, have Mannaz show up, perhaps as the challenge rune, to tell you in an upright position. Of course, Mannaz is then in an upright position to tell you to have more faith and confidence in yourself. You know you're a good artist. You are perhaps accepted into a gallery. And part of how you will sell art is how you portray yourself. You portray yourself as a pleasant, outgoing individual, or do you portray yourself as a very nasty individual who just, in that case, you will be less likely to sell something to someone because if you can't communicate with someone about, hey, this person wants to buy your art, but you're sitting there like, yeah, okay, $500, nobody's going to approach you, nobody's going to like you, nobody's going to want to buy from you again because at the end of the day, that's just people care about those sorts of things. People care about your appearance. People care about how you portray yourself, how you carry yourself, how you act. It is very much something that is necessary to utilize in societal interactions. So, in a spiritual sense, Mannaz upright to me, other than what I have already discussed at the beginning of this video, of course, it is the polarity and duality, but yet cooperation of male, female, masculine, feminine. It is that balance which I very strongly feel is, represented in its shape too. It's a very even rune, but it has two sides, if you will. It is a very balanced rune. It is a very balanced looking rune too. So oftentimes I also feel that when people in society are dealing with masculine and feminine energy, we often see that women, especially these days, are overall more encouraged than men to embrace the energy that is traditionally associated with the opposite sex or opposite gender. And men these days are, well, men throughout history perhaps have been encouraged to shut off their access to feminine energies. Now, okay, as a Pisces man, for example, I am a Pisces man. We are associated with the element of water. Um, Water, as Lagus will show, is traditionally associated, Lagus, the water rune also, is traditionally associated with the feminine energies. Now, what I mean by feminine energies in this context is very much psychic energy. It is intuitive, empathy, stuff like that, So there is a very, very strong influence, I feel, on men in that regard. And as a Pisces man, I fortunately have not really had that much issues internally with utilizing such energies. Because I like to think that due to being aligned with that sign, with that influence, with that energy of water and of the sign itself, um, yeah, I've never had an issue with empathy. I've never had an issue with expressing how I perceive things, how I feel about things, or how I communicate things. And in fact, I'm very open to the point of sometimes shocking some people. And I don't do that to be an asshole, although I sometimes can kind of be an asshole, I'm not gonna lie. But, I do not have a problem expressing myself. I do not have a problem showing affection to my woman. I do not have a problem showing affection to my friends in most cases. It's sometimes hard for me, but that is more due to trauma that I have acquired over this lifetime, rather than something that I innately have, if that makes sense. So perhaps I should have worded that differently then. Um, Deep down, I have no issue with it. Never used to have until certain events happened in terms of friendship, like the example of my ex-mentor that I cited in the beginning of this video. Because let's face it, that is a very fucked up grand betrayal. So it's pathetic. I don't even know. But to me, it's just more further proof that what I'm doing is the right thing. So it's really just something that I find very interesting because as someone, a guy who is masculine but who has no difficulty expressing this and who is also into the metaphysical, who engages with energy a lot, who engages with all this stuff basically that I'm talking to you about a lot. It is very peculiar to me how men are always conditioned to not recognize these things in themselves. And understanding these emotional currents, these energetic currents, is of course paramount to being a powerhouse in the metaphysical. And I think traditionally this is why, partially why women are traditionally seen as more potent spirit workers. I disagree with this view very strongly. And that is not just because I'm a man, but I'm arguing with this from the idea that we are all divine, immortal souls. We all come from this same being. I very strongly believe that this has to do with conditioning. I very strongly believe that it just has to do with men not being allowed to recognize these things. Yes, there are studies, of course. As a student of psychology, I am also aware of this, that show that boys have overall more affinity for certain kinds of expressions and activities, competition compared to collaboration and stuff like that. I am aware of that. I am aware that there are differences in the genders, and there should be, but in the terms of psychic energy, psychic potency, I do very strongly believe that a lot of that is very much conditioned, and that has manifested itself in perhaps for women, very empowering thing. And I respect and understand that it's there. I very strongly do, because women throughout history have, in a lot of cases, just been trampled upon, used. So I do feel that there is a sense of empowerment for women there. But it is at the same time, I have noticed with nature, it has a way of balancing things out. Men may have more physical strength, but at the same time, women are also far more resistant to pain than we are. So I also like to think that men innately are just as powerful psychically, but they very strongly may lean towards a different path, which is why you often see that, you have the berserkers and Ulfdenar, who are said to be shamanic warriors in the Norse sagas, and where they go into like a berserker rage and a berserker trance and stuff like that. Um, and they don't feel pain, and they don't, it's very strongly focused on competition and warfare. And I have seen this in myself. I would just basically like to make the point that Mannaz, being the balancing rune that it is, I think people in general just have different draws. I mean, you see in the in the sagas and in the material that we have from the quote unquote Viking age and stuff like that, where cipher is practiced by either women or by cross-dressing men who may or may not have been homosexuals. Stuff like that, where if a man practices cipher, he has to dress up like a woman, and stuff like that, and it's very exclusive to um, effeminate or feminine individuals. And where then on the other hand you have these berserkers and Ulfdenar who are supposed to be shamanic warriors. This dichotomy there, and it is very much a balanced thing. I do strongly feel that there is a balance there. I do not think that men are better than women. I do not think that women are better than men. I think just like with the physical, where men have greater physical strength, but where women have greater pain tolerance, which is of course imperative to giving birth. I mean, it would probably kill me, if I were met with such excruciating pain. And I'm very well aware of that, and it is in some ways quite humbling. So, I like to think nature balances things out in ways, even in the psychic realm, because I am aware that some spiritual paths teach that women are just more spiritually powerful. Again, I disagree, not because I'm a man, but because I very strongly believe that we all have a divine, sexless, genderless origin. So to me, it just doesn't make sense that this would be the case. It just means that the way in which it is expressed is different. And this is, I feel, to the betterment of everyone involved. Because I just feel that it is a healthy thing to throw out there in my experience. We then come to Mannaz converse and what it means in divination. So Mannaz converse may indicate dishonesty. It may indicate that the person being inquired about is lying. It may also indicate that the person or situation inquired about is hindered by a flaw or by an internal blockage, or perhaps some other traits that are holding them back from achieving their objective, from achieving their goal, from achieving whatever it is that they're doing. Um, Perhaps even on a more subconscious level, perhaps it is something that they are not willing to recognize. And I will, yeah, no. It may, if you are inquiring, because again, Mannaz can also be utilized in the societal, in the societal capacity or in the interpersonal capacity. It may indicate a blockage or stagnation, even perhaps, or like some sort of hindrance in uh, perhaps the collective subconscious, such as the whole world adhering to the Abrahamic religions, or at least a very significant portion of the world adhering to the Abrahamic religions, which is to our detriment as a species, very strongly so, not just spiritually, but we do also see this in our disconnect with nature. And I do very strongly feel that this partially is because of um, the absolute loathing that the Abrahamic religions have for the spirit, for the physical realm. It's all about come to me, join me up here in heaven, and it's literally yes, I am very active in my anti-Abrahamic campaigning. I have become as such because the more I engage with spiritual work, the more I just realize it's an absolute system of evil. That's just what it is. It's a system of evil. So this too can be, for example, a representation of a blockage on a societal level. People are just too stupid or not awake to realize that this is um, that this is that this is what is part of what is slowly killing us. So Mannaz and Converse is an example of that. Suppose that you are inquiring about your love life. And deep down, you kind of already just know that, your love life is just failing miserably. Your relationship is kind of shit, and it's kind of not going anywhere. But you're just telling yourself that, oh, maybe things will change. Maybe things will go the other direction sometime soon. If I just wait long enough, or if I just keep forgiving them for just what they're doing, even though it bothers the absolute fuck out of me, um, you know it is yeah it you might do a rune reading, and if Mannaz and Converse shows up as a challenge, which it likely will, it will literally basically say to you, listen, um, you are being an idiot. You already know what's going on, but you are refusing to see it. You are refusing to acknowledge it, and you are called upon to face that and remove yourself from the situation, which may eventually end up happening through a breakup. And on that note, if you willfully put a stop, or if you willfully put a stop to your relationship, if you have that inner strength instead of letting it play out like many people do, perhaps out of laziness, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of not wanting to be alone, um, this will actually help you develop internally and spiritually. It will help you to set healthy boundaries for yourself, to realize that enough is enough. And this, of course, also applies to what my own experiences have taught me. There's only so much people can get away with. There's only so much that people can do to you before enough is enough, and things start providing some backlash for the other individual. So Mannaz converse, spiritual meaning that it has to me. It is very applicable. It is about deceiving oneself. So it is something that I have had personal experience with. I think it is often very rewarding to face oneself, to empower oneself in such a manner. I think it is very powerful to strengthen oneself in the face of adversity, to bust through blockages, to admit to yourself when you know you're right about something, to not let other people dictate to you what it is that you should be doing or feeling. And it is also very powerful to me to realize and recognize that you are, at the end of the day, in such situations, what allows a blockage to persist. Because, yes, magic is a very powerful tool, but at the end of the day, all you really need to do to get rid of it is know it yourself. And in that sense, not knowing magic is a blockage in and of itself because that power is available to everyone. I don't care how young or old you are. I don't care if you are African, Caucasian, if you are Asian, or wherever you come from in the world. It is accessible to everyone. And it is accessible to everyone at every time. Contracts with deities like Yahweh, there are really no excuses for situations like this. And this is where I found my self empowerment once again. That really the only one at this point who stood in the way of me breaking free from this semi-zombification bullshit was myself. And now that I have done that, I'm not sure if and now that I have done that, I just find myself more complete. Like I have felt more complete for a good portion of today because of what I have found today. And it is a beautiful thing to me to twist an opponent's attacks and use such attacks against him. That is a beautiful thing to me. I think that is a very glorious manipulation tactic. That there is no greater fun to me than to turn an opponent's own strategies on themselves and just to watch them roast themselves while I just sit back and watch the fireworks. It's great. And I used to be so very against using baneful magic back in the day. It absolutely has a place. And yeah, I absolutely I find it great. I just find it fantastic. So we are going to be moving on to Mannaz in reverse and what it means in divination. So Mannaz in reverse indicates negative actions and consequences for the person or even the society at large if we are dealing with a societal problem. It indicates that negative actions are taking place or have taken place. The action that someone else or even you that you are considering or that they may be considering, that the action will lead to detriment of the self, of the society, perhaps the people around you. And in many cases, this will likely just be unintentional because there are other runes that deal with intentional malice, of course. One can think of Furisas or Naudas or other such runes which might be more applicable to binding and pricking and stabbing and willful harm basically. So and I'm just throwing it out there. There are of course a lot of different interpretations which you could give to every individual rune, but basically, it indicates that negative actions will lead to negative consequences, and negative actions may be overt or covert, it may be intentional or unintentional. Um, and this is not to say, of course, that negative actions taken, such as rebellion, for example, cannot have positive outcomes. It cannot have, it is not guaranteed that a negative action in order to upset the societal order, perhaps, And by the way, I'm not actively advocating rebellion. If you're watching this and in your particular case, I'm just saying it is a possible um, interpretation of this rune on a perhaps societal level. It is a call to action to, you know, how do I want to say this? To focus your intention inward first before you start exerting yourself in the outward world. Because if you have not thought your actions through very well, your consequences that you may be receiving or causing are maybe potentially going to be rather nasty. They might be very, very unpleasant, not just for you, but for everybody involved. So it may basically be saying to you, you are lacking judgment in how you are choosing to execute it, or even the fact that you want to execute something. And by execute, I mean carry out, not necessarily end someone's life. But yeah, you understand my meaning. So an example of Mannaz in reverse is, for example, someone has slighted you in some way, perhaps perceived way, to stick within the context of my own personal experiences here. They may, injure you, they may hurt your pride, or they may do something to you so that you become fueled with vengeance, right? You're getting all hot-headed and like steam's coming out of your ears. You're not really thinking your actions through all that much. You're doing all this stuff in your head to them, and you decide in a moment of clarity to consult the runes, and you may want to see what the outcome of your actions, your vengeful actions, may be that you have plotted in revenge. Manas in reverse may indicate that it will cause negative actions, negative consequences, perhaps some of them unforeseen. That maybe the curse you thrown on someone may not just affect the individual that has wronged you, but also the innocent spouse of the individual, or perhaps the innocent children of the individual, or you name it. And in that case, you are not thinking your actions through. You haven't thought the curse out in such a way that it would not actively target the individual themselves only, but that it may, be so volatile that it may spread out to other people and hurt them in some way, shape, or form, which was not your intent because you are, well, you're not at war with them, you are at war with another individual. You are not at war with the spouse or the kids, you are at war with the individual that you aim to curse at. So, manas in reverse in spiritual meaning, it indicates to me a separation of self, again, as I have had people try to do to me, which is funny though, because it doesn't quite work like that, I've found. Deep down, you always remain aware of who you are, even though you try to, even though others may try to twist you in the wrong ways, whether they use it through magic or mental manipulation directly, maybe even forceful physical coercion. These are all things that are possible. It may be through your own actions, like you take an action that is not in line with your higher self, with your essence of who you are in this particular incarnation. It may not be in line with your life goals that you have set. It may not be in line with, what you have said that you would be doing. Forget a promise, to not uphold a promise, for example. It may also be an indication of false teachers, false friends, fake friends, trying to steer you away from your purpose. It may be, and it may be a call even to, change your way of thinking, to examine yourself, to just sit down, maybe even with a mirror in front of you, and look yourself in the eye and think to yourself, who am I? Who am I really?
and think to yourself, what do I want to do? Am I going to let these people tell me what to do, or am I just going to do what I want to do, what I feel I need to do, what I feel I should be doing? Am I going to go with the flow? Am I going to stay a member of the flock of sheep? Or am I going to realize that I am, in fact, a divine being that is capable of dancing and willing to dance to their own tune? Am I going to realize that the other person is indeed also a divinity, but that doesn't mean that they're always right? Gods make mistakes, ladies and gentlemen. They make mistakes just like we do. We are gods. We are in the flesh, yes, but we are gods. That does not mean that gods cannot make mistakes. That is a Christian concept, and it is very much wrong. Read the Bible, the amount of contradictions that are in the Bible, because that kind of mindset is very much a relatively new thing in our Christian indoctrination. Most pagan pantheons are portrayed as being fallible, and they are. They are, and it is just the truth of it. It's just the truth of it. They're beings just like us who can make mistakes. Spirits are not flawless. Spirits do not always have the answers. There are spirits who don't like you. There are spirits who like you. There are spirits who are neutral to you. The vast majority of beings out there are indifferent to you because they don't know you. They don't know who you are. They don't know what you stand for. It's that simple. So that is a thing that Mannaz in reverse very strongly deals with to me, to recognize that you are straying from who you are supposed to be. And who you are supposed to be is most likely who you deep down think you need to be, not who others are telling you to be. So, and that is not to say that we cannot correct the actions of others if they somehow fuck us over. I've already talked about that in this video. Tiwaz has already taught us that difference. It is not the same thing as holding others accountable for their actions. To fuck someone over willingly and because we can. Holding someone accountable for their actions within reasonable terms is Tiwaz. But doing something way out of proportion just because we're spiteful, because we're vengeful, that is not Tiwaz, that is not justice. That is just you being a petty little bitch. And with that, I would like to conclude this video because we have discussed everything that we need to discuss here tonight. And like I said, had a long day, had a bit of partying going on, so it's been a good day, and it's been a great day actually, not just a good day. I would like to thank you all for watching, and I look very much forward to seeing you in Lagus, the rune of water, the rune of oceans, the rune of psychic connections. Traditionally, like I mentioned earlier in the video, a very feminine rune, and I look forward to be plunged in its depths. So, hail.